I imagine many of you work in advocacy. Raise your hand if you work in advocacy. Right? How about if you work in the mix between advocacy and politics, social causes, social change? Raise your hand. I think pretty much all of us are in the business of social change, right? So thank you so much for coming today. What we're going to do in this session is that we're going to share with you some of the newest tools on digital advocacy. And also, we have Mike Moschella, who's on his way here. Lots of air travels today. He's flying from DC. That is going to share a study on social media for politics and government. So thank you so much. So I am Jimena Herzog, and I am one of the founders of. How do I move this?
Maybe use the keyboard, the arrows.
Okay, great. And I am one of the founders of FundAction, that is a civic technology platform based in Washington, D.C. And, I have a background in education, government, as well as lots of work in advocacy. We have some little tags about us because it's easy to describe us that way. John, who's next to me, is also with FundAction, but he's also the founder of Catalyst, which is a digital strategy company that's done tremendous work on not just advocacy campaigns, but campaigns of a larger scale. And Mike Moschella, who's coming later, is one of the probably most progressive and interesting leaders in political campaigning, and he's the founder of the Organizer Center. The Organizer Center is a little bit of a hub, clearinghouse, where you can find strategy and tactics for political campaigning, but also for advocacy. Why are we here? So you probably have heard a little bit about the new field of civic technology. This is new because a few years ago we didn't have APIs, we didn't have all of the information that we have today stored in the cloud. We didn't have that many mobile phones, and certainly not smartphones. And with the creation of all of these new technologies, we put a lot of power back to people. And by giving this power back to people, this new field of everyone sort of getting together, not maybe physically, but with digital personas, start activating all this wave of change, of social change. If you've seen it overseas, you've seen it here in the country. It's happening every single day. So civic technology is not political technology. It's not based on lawmakers and what they do. It's based on what people can do to advance social change. And we're very proud to be part of this new field. We created this technology. I was coming from advocacy, and I lived in California. I had the pleasure to live in California, but I lived in Sacramento. If you've been in Sacramento, you probably heard that it's really fun because it's 45 minutes away from San Francisco and from Tahoe and from everything else. Most people in Sacramento, go other places is not necessarily a lot to do there. But by being in Sacramento, I had the opportunity to see all of these new technologies, and I saw the gap between advocacy and technology. And we funded FundAction. We were able to be very successful, in helping causes to have some kind of to move the needle on social causes. Digital advocacy is the power that people have to connect with elected officials, members of Congress, or anyone in a variety of forms. In the past, it was always via email and phone calls, but today, through geotechnology, we are able to match people against their elected officials via Twitter, Facebook, and many other forms. So why this is happening? Because as you know, if you're trying to change a law or pass a policy, change a regulation, normally the only way for people to connect with their elected officials has been knowing their email address and emailing them. But if for members of Congress, you actually have to sign a web form. How many of you know your 9-digit zip code? You do your 9-digit zip code? The 9-digit zip code. You do? Oh.
Wow.
You are one of the few, because when you sign a web form to connect with your senators or House representatives, you actually, for the most part, you have to know it. You also have to do it from a computer. And lots of people, especially low-income, people, they don't have necessarily internet at home. And so these forms that are very difficult to conduct, are the only really mainstream way that a member of Congress can be contacted in the standard way. And most of these communications are email, and this massive volume of email have, saturated these folks. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, since we're going to do a little bit of trivia here, and then you're going to tell me. And the reason for this is because we know that email alone, phone calls alone, visits alone are no longer the most effective way to connect with our lawmakers. So what other ways can be? So how many of you know the answer of this? Raise your hand if you know the answer. So who has the most followers on Twitter?
Cory Booker.
Cory Booker. Another one?
John McCain.
John McCain. Another one? No? So who is the winner? John McCain. You came a little bit behind, but it's Mr. John McCain. And Marco Rubio, Pelosi, and Boehner are actually following. It's very interesting that not.
There are more questions.
So what we've seen today, and this is because of this emerging power of social media, is that members of Congress are communicating with their constituents in different ways. And they're using social media as one of those tools. And raise your hand if you can tell me what this image represents. Let's take a look. Raise your hand and tell me what does this mean? Okay.
Getting ready.
Who posted this? Why?
Well, everybody was upset he was gonna wear that brown suit.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Nice black one.
Okay, keep going.
Right.
Who did this?
His wife.
The White House social media guy. No, the social media person before.
The famous tan suit that everybody's talking about.
Right. So this is actually the president on the day of what was the name? Yes, the State of the Union. And he did this picture right before the State of the Union and said, this is the suit that I have. You see his shoes right here?
And the socks.
And he has socks there. Well, he's actually not trying to, no, it's good. It's not trying to clean up. It's actually being very personal, very modest, and it's very, very real about, so this is a very different way of communicating. You wouldn't think this, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, a president actually tweeted something like this. This normally happens in a very private way. So it shows you that they are going out in a different manner and engaging in a different manner. So how the members of Congress how are they using Twitter today? So you see Cory Booker connecting with their constituents. With his constituents. And this person is asking him, are you gonna come and help us with the snow? And he said, well, I can't because I have to stay here in DC. So he's telling a real person that lives in his district why he cannot be there. They also use it to, in Facebook, they use it also to share how they feel about particular issues. That's Warner. And they also use it to tell regulations, organizations like the FCC and others, or anyone, how they feel about a particular. So in the past, you will never see a member of Congress actually sharing policies on Twitter and Facebook. And some of them are actually really funny. John Dingell, look at that, what he said. I'm the last original author of the Clean Water Act, but I have no idea who a Kardashian is. And I rarely play games. Are you okay, EPA Waters? Talking to EPA. So it's like wondering, what is EPA? He's 89 now, it was 88 last year when he wrote this. And he's asking now, he come back a few minutes after he writes this. So he's actually, engaging, and he's being very personal about it. One of the myths that social media is only for youngsters, is debunked here, that, John Daniel is actually, he was one of the oldest members of Congress, and is very active on social media. So where are we going with all of this? We're going to show you how our tools created to connect to connect constituents through social media by matching anyone against their lawmakers and tweeting directly at them or Facebooking directly at them anywhere in the states. And John is going to do that.
Thank you, Jimena. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is really great to have a full room here. So building off what Jimena is talking about, digital tools and social media are empowering very passionate people to take action and connect with their legislators. And organizations are using phone to action to empower those movements and to connect those advocates with their elected officials. So, looking at it from the advocate's perspective, it's really easy now to connect with your elected official. So using your mobile phone, and that's a huge part of what Phone to Action is, you can enter your address and easily get matched up with your local representative, your federal senator, your governor, and make a phone call, send an email, a tweet, or a Facebook message. Oh, wait. So before we go to the next slide, you might have had a little cheat sheet there. We want to know how many adults, what percentage of adults are actually on social media? Any guesses? Raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Hold on.
Age range, so 18 and over?
18 and over, adults. No Googling, no Googling. In the US.
80 something.
Oh, you've already gotten one.
80 something. 80 something.
One at a time, raise your hand. 75%.
89.
89?
70%.
70. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Who is the closest one, I guess?
It was, I believe, what's your name? Maria, okay. Close. It fluctuates. So what this is telling us, and what we've done as Phone to Action, is we've built our tools around these two very important trends, and that's social media usage and penetration in adults, and also what Jimena was talking about, which is social media usage by members of Congress. On the other side, we have smartphone penetration, and that by the end of this year, according to the Pew Foundation, is going to be close to 85%. So looking at the intersection of smartphone penetration and social media, you can see that people are taking action from their phones anywhere in the world. And so our tools are empowering those people to do that. And it's really changing the way that these campaigns are having success.
So no.
Oh, do we have
Question.
right. Our next question. Okay. So what percentage of the U.S. House of Representatives do you think is on Twitter? Okay. Let's start with you.
85.
Okay. In the back?
70%.
70%. Okay.
95.
95. 75. 100? Okay. You win. It's 97% of the House of Representatives.
I said 95.
You said 95? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Oh, he was here.
No. So you can see, so what this tells us is that elected officials are using social media to get insights and perspectives into what their constituents are saying, what they're thinking, and to get the pulse of what these issues are looking like from a constituent perspective. You can see at the federal level, 100% of the U.S. Senate is on Facebook and Twitter, 97% of the U.S. House. Governors, very high percentage, and you can see we start to have a mix down on the cabinet level. When you get down to local politics, it's a little bit less, but that number is going up. And what that tells us is that even on local issues, this is really important to use these tools if you want to make an impact as an organization or a movement. So the FundAction Platform is divided into two sides. On this right side here, we've got your campaign tools. So as an advocacy manager, and some of you I'm sure are digital advocacy managers, you're going to be able to create campaigns on specific issues that your organization is running. So whether that's clean water, an environmental issue, an education issue, it's really easy to go into FundAction and in a few minutes create a microsite for your issue. You can actually text message your supporters from our platform, which, given the inbox competitiveness that email is experiencing, that's a really huge advantage to be able to send a text message to your advocates and to be able to reach them, again, on their smartphone. You can look at analytics, and this is a very robust system for being able to track and record engagements with elected officials. And that's a huge issue that we've heard from different organizations, is that they'll ask their advocates to tweet their official, to Facebook their official, but they have no actual way of tracking this kind of activity. So that's important for an organization to be able to get funding next year for their issue, to be able to show that progress and that type of activity. On the left side, that's to show what different tools we give organizations to connect their advocates with their officials. So it's a petition tool, a tweeting tool, email, etc., what we've already gone over here. So here's a look at some of our partners. We work with a broad range of partners across different issues, from education to environment and beyond. Okay. So this is an example of what an advocate is going to see when they navigate to a micro center. And this is what we've come up with as the best practice and most likely to get people to engage. So you've got a summary of the issue here on the left, and you can even embed video here, which really is important for telling a story and to get someone excited. So these are passionate people that want to take action, and we want to facilitate that. On the right side, you can notice that there are just a few different forms that you have to fill out as an advocate, and that's a huge challenge that we've identified, and that's reducing the number of fields that an advocate has to fill out. If you go to a congressional web form, it asks you for maybe 8 to 10 different things. It's a really big pain to actually do this. And so reducing that makes it all the more likely that someone's going to actually go ahead and complete that and send the email and send the tweet. And with one click, someone's going to be able to send out that email. So here's an example of one of our partners that's taken our platform and really run with it. And this is CrossFit in DC. And they're going through some political and policy-related issues, and they're using our platform to connect all of those CrossFit members in DC with their elected officials. And this feeds into the back end of the FundAction Platform. So I'll tell you about a quick case study. The American Heart Association in New York, they had been working on an issue for 15 years. This was it's an issue that you would think would be easy to pass through the different levels of lawmakers. So it was a CPR training bill, and they wanted to have all graduating high school seniors CPR trained. And the reason for this, and the reason they were pushing this, was because there had been some unnecessary deaths related to sudden cardiac arrest, and if someone nearby had been trained in CPR, we could have saved lives. So for 15 years, they'd been trying to pass this bill through. It had gotten out of the State House a few times and made it onto the governor's desk, but he had never signed it into legislation. And the reason why, there was a number of different political and lobbying issues that he had faced. It put him against the education lobby, the teachers lobby, and quite frankly, he didn't want to go out and publicly impact the curriculum for teachers. So it was a tough issue for the governor, and he didn't sign the law into legislation a few times. So American Heart came to us, they used our tools, and they went around the state from June 2014 all the way through August, and they empowered the different parents associations to go to their meetings with different parents and recruit them. And they basically said the same thing that I did. They said, listen, we've got this CPR bill, it's going to be coming out of the House again in August, and we need your support. So for 2 months, American Heart did this. They empowered their grass tops leaders with the text-in tool. And they built up their list, and when that bill made it out of the State House again in August, they drove a bunch of text messages out to those supporters that they had collected over that time and asked them to send a tweet and a Facebook message to Governor Cuomo. So they had their Twitter Tuesday, and they ended up driving hundreds and hundreds of tweets on Facebook. So as you can imagine, Governor Cuomo sitting at his desk deciding whether to sign this into legislation. You know, he's starting to think, okay, there's a lot of pressure now, there's a lot of social media activity around this issue. Maybe I need to rethink my position. So you can imagine starting to get blog coverage, all types of different attention. They followed it up with a patch-through call on Thursday, 2 days later. And following this huge social media blitz, Governor Cuomo ended up signing the bill into legislation. So after 14 years, using social media and empowering people to be able to create a movement that was bigger than just them, they were able to impact this legislation and get it passed. Any tech company that wants to make it easy for folks to use it has to integrate with other partners. And we have some select tech partners that we work with. NationBuilder, and Mike is an expert on this, and Mike really is going to have a lot more to say about how to tailor your campaigns and how members of Congress are actually using social media in specific ways. So he'll give you the roadmap on that. So, Mike, I'm so glad you made it.
So I wanted to explain a little bit. FundAction is a startup, it's a company that is very lucky to have funding from a very good group of investors. And we created a Civic Tech Fund for research and also to increase the pipeline of minorities in technology. Mike Moschella is one of the leaders in politics in the country, and he founded the Organizer Center. And the first thing that we did with him is say, okay, Mike, can you actually do a research study around how social media is actually used by elected officials, not just like by us, but by elected officials, and how the two of them engage. And Mike is gonna share with you now what he found. The study was just released a couple of days ago. So Mike.
And I put together some special Miami stats just for all of you. Thank you for the intro. I got here just on time, grand entrance, compliments of American Airlines flight delays. But I love being in Miami because it just reminds me that I will never, ever get a tan in my entire life. I come here frequently. So I'm something called Irish, and so I'm pink. It's okay.
And actually, in the beginning, we did say a few things about you, Mike. And we go back to that, and maybe you can explain what this means.
Oh, bourbon? You'll know, it's like sort of, it's like a Kentucky version of rum. I'm a bourbon expert. And I'm a colonel, commissioning Kentucky colonel. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about how we use social media. I spent a decade in politics, helping campaigns and advocacy organizations figure out how to use technology to be successful. After John Kerry lost to George W. Bush, I was part of a team of former Clinton folks that created an organization called the New Politics Institute, which existed to study how the internet and how all these digital fancy things were changing political strategy. I ended up managing a bunch of congressional races around the country, including one here in Florida, which was really fun. I tell everybody never manage a House race in Florida because you're the hardest working person you know. Everyone else around you is going to the beach, hanging out, having fun. Like manage House races in like North Dakota, where nobody does anything except for drink, and then it's no big deal that you work till like midnight every single night. But Florida, that was a tough one. I was up in West Palm.
Can't go to the beach.
Can't compete. It's hard. How are you going to get volunteers? You're like, hey, do you want to knock on doors and make phone calls or go to the beach? It's impossible. So anyway, I ended up at a company helping to build a company called NationBuilder, and there I had a team of 50 organizers. And we worked with about 9,000 different campaigns and advocacy organizations and major nonprofits, including most of the liberal parties in democracies around the world. So I worked in about 98 countries, and we would help folks kind of upgrade their tech game and leverage technology and email and Twitter and all these things to do really effective organizing. And this summer, I decided, well, I'd rather not just do that with one company. I'd rather be able to work with lots and lots of companies, take all this really fascinating information and help understand all these really interesting tools that you can use. So we just launched the Organizing Center. It's www.organizing.center. And one of the first major reports that we put out just on Wednesday, if you don't read the Wall Street Journal religiously, you might not have seen, was a new index that we created called the SPRI. And the SPRI stands for the Social Platform Responsiveness Index. And the goal of the SPRI is to be able to measure quantitatively how responsive an elected official is to his or her constituents on these new communication tools, Twitter and Facebook primarily. Now, I personally have been obsessed for about half of my life with how people engage in politics and really what the fundamental relationship is between a leader and the citizens. I think that question is sort of like really the underpinning of democracy. And if you look at like human advancement throughout humanity, it's very closely related. Societies do really well when leaders are really, really responsive. And I had a personal experience that kind of was foundational. I grew up in a sort of strict Catholic, mostly military family. And so I was sort of taught to fear authority, because if you did anything wrong, you would go to hell. And so that was sort of the world that I grew up in. Probably actually not too different from like many Catholic Latin American influence households, where you have sort of like very masculine driving, like, do this because I say so culture. And I went to Catholic school, and then I went to school in upstate New York, to college, and escaped my family. And I became a member of the College Democrats because I was really cool. And thank you, one person got the joke. And the school lobbyist came in one day, and she said, hey, we're going to put a whole busload of students together and drive down to Washington, D.C. and lobby for financial aid. And I thought, this is the coolest thing ever. I get a free trip to Washington, D.C., and I'll go and, make a really important... I was dependent on financial aid and still pay off some of those loans. So we went down to Washington, D.C., and at the time my parents' representative where we lived was a guy named, I'm from Boston, a guy named Bill Delahunt. And he represented the South Shore of Boston and Cape Cod. So this would be like Joe Garcia's seat, or Joe Garcia's old seat, probably here. And Bill Delahunt was a sort of a notorious eccentric. Anybody ever see Alpha House? The show with like John Goodman about the House of Congressmen. He was in the real Alpha House with Chuck Schumer and some other people. But Bill Delahunt was like sort of a weird guy. He only wore Massachusetts-themed ties and just did things that were nutty. And I went into the office, and I had I was just this kid. I was an 18-year-old kid. And Congressman Delahunt treated me and received me as if I was like a really important visiting dignitary. Like he was my long-term friend. And I was amazed by this because it totally shifted my whole worldview that authority is sort of to be feared and don't do anything wrong. And here I was, this 18-year-old kid who just had a point of view, and here's a congressman, one of the most powerful people in the world, who really wants to talk policy with me. And I went back every year, and so Congressman Delahunt and I kind of it was like, hey, Mike, and the office, they knew I'd come in, and they were like, hey, well, we voted for all the things. They were really supportive financially, and that was awesome. And I just think the world should kind of have a lot of Congressman Delahunts where you all can have a lot of relationships like that. And Twitter and Facebook and all these new communication tools really help us to do that if we use them well. So the question was, well, how does it really work? So we created this index to start to measure it. Who are the Bill Delahunts? And the index it includes 4 main components. So how many people do you have on your Twitter and your Facebook compared to the rest of the people in your governing body? Plus, how interactive and engaged are you? So primarily, if I start a conversation with you, if I'm a nobody and I start tweeting at you or Facebooking, will you actually respond? Will you get me to the right person in your office? Will you write back to me? Will you address the concern? If, something's wrong with the bus and you tweet at me, do I actually care about it? And in order to do that, I have a team that will literally review months of the data to go through. And in about a snapshot of a month, you can kind of tell if somebody responds or not. And then we assign some numbers to that. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you some interesting things. We did this for Congress because people really care about Congress a lot and spend a lot of money, but we also have started to build the SPRI into some city governments. So here's DC, San Francisco, and Miami, and we'll show you, we combine Miami County and city elected officials, the city commission and the county commission, because we just thought it was fair. There's a lot of overlap in what they all do. So the top score that you can get on SPRI is 2. And the bottom is 0. And Miami averaged about a 0.98, which was not as good as San Francisco and Washington. However, it was better than both houses of Congress. So you're better than Congress. And then here's some audience size averages, Facebook and Twitter. Interestingly, so Miami, pretty strong Facebook audiences for your Miami reps. Not quite San Francisco, but a lot better than Washington. And here's Twitter down here. So Miami, very interestingly, not so hot on Twitter. A lot less responsive than some other city governments. So maybe that's something that you all in this room could push when you meet with your city councilors and county commissioners. Kind of get them going a little bit on Twitter. If we go to the next slide, I'll show you the rankings of your. These are got a little formatted strange, but you can figure it out. These are actually your county commissioners ranked from, and mayor ranked from top to bottom. So 2's the best score you can get, 0 is the worst. So both Suarez's, who knows, maybe Suarez is just a great name for social media, like Luis Suarez, Regalado, they're kind of Zapata and Diaz are sort of your top people here. But it's not just that they've been around longer, because it's that their offices are really responsive. And you can talk to these folks. And then sort of in the bottom, you got Sarnoff and Arriero, and, so maybe these people need a little kick in the butt. And we've seen it work, by the way. In Washington, D.C., there was one particular city councilor who just wouldn't use Twitter, and there was a campaign to get him on Twitter. Now he tweets all the time. So you can actually change these. One of the nice things about the SPRI index is that it's dynamic. So anybody can improve their score by actually caring or building a bigger audience. And we think that that's one of the nice things about social media, right? It's not static. It's a very dynamic thing. Now, one of the really interesting things that we can do, we'll just go to the next slide, with this information, once we can quantify your responsiveness, is we can start to understand trends in whole new ways. So here's every one of these dots represents a Democrat in the United States House of Representatives. And I could show you Republicans or different caucuses or different states or the Senate or whatever, but I just thought this was interesting. And each of these dots is then plotted not only between how good you are in the SPRI index, how good your social media responsiveness is, which are the people at the top, but it's then plotted against how liberal or conservative your district is. So we get a sense of ideology. So the dots on the left, these are the people in the most liberal districts, and the ones further right are the ones in the most right-wing district, and 0, anything up here, if there were an imaginary line, that would be a perfectly balanced congressional district. right? So now let's get, how many people here like work in some sort of advocacy organization or like campaign organization, like how many people have causes that, you know, where they'll like, you know, type in and say, hey, congressman, or like, hey, commissioner, or whatever, you should really do what I think you should do. You should all do that because it's like they actually pay attention. Now, if you're running a group that does that, this data or being able to view this can become incredibly helpful. Because I can start to see kind of grouping. So like, here are the people who are great at social media, who are in like really left-wing districts. And if I'm advocating for like, say, energy, clean energy, or the environment, or women's rights, or Black Lives Matter, now I know like, these are the folks I want to talk to. These are the people that will get my message out. Right, this here is like Joe Kennedy. And Joe Kennedy will be a champion for me. Meanwhile, these people who are kind of also liberal, maybe we don't want to spend as much time tweeting or Facebooking them. Meanwhile, like say I'm advocating for like a very centrist issue, education, some sort of health reform, transportation. Now I want to maybe talk to like people who are very moderate, because the left, yeah, they're with me, right? But I want to talk to the moderates and I want to try to sway them because we're talking about like bus fares or whatever. Well, now I can kind of look at the folks over here, and I can see there's a cluster of people that really aren't so good. Now, I call this scaring the DCCC. The DCCC is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, this group of people, because they're in sort of right-wing districts. Like, they could really lose their seat. These are Democrats in kind of like districts that voted for Mitt Romney, and they're not very good at responding. And that's like a really concerning thing. And as a like, if you're laying out a strategy, you might want to know that. And then lastly, you get kind of this chart, and these are people that are like really ambitious. So like Alan Grayson is in this chart, the congressman from the Orlando area who's running for Senate here. And then Patrick Murphy's a little worse. Patrick Murphy's in this New Kids on the Block chart. These are so he's like not quite as great at the social media responsiveness index as Alan Grayson, but you know, he's got a little bit more of a monarchism. So, you know, we'll see. You can kind of like start to get a sense of like, oh, this is how the Alan Graysons of the world work. This is how the Patrick Murphys of the world work. This is how the Debbie Wasserman Schultzes of the world work. You know, how's that for some Florida knowledge for a Boston guy? So we thought that was really interesting, and you know, I'd be happy to share that any of the Miami info or kind of like work through. For the FundAction team is really great at working through insights. If you're creating websites where people are going to do legislative lobbying, or you have an organization where you want to really put a proactive effort to talk to your elected officials, having some of this information can really help make a very clear and effective strategic roadmap for you all, and we're just like thrilled to help and make it awesome so that you can all be friends with whoever your version of Bill Delahunt is. Cool? Questions?
Question, how do you charge for your services, per campaign or by subscription?
For FundAction, it's software, it's subscription, and you get trained and support all the time. But it's a self-service platform.
What's the average time of a user, like the company you group subscribe? What's the average length of time that they utilize your services? 6 months, a year?
I mean, most people, that are in advocacy, they try to have a sustainable relationship with their users. So they have some companies that will send us a selfie about this, or let's celebrate Earth Day. So it's not all about communicating with the lawmaker. It's also about engaging with each other. It could be 6 months. Most people try to do this. Organizations do it over time through the years.
Good question. Like anyone want to like challenge me? Come on, you're not as fun as like the geeks in DC. Like, oh, the guy's got stats. We agree. You know.
When I go over
We're
this
thinking
one,
about the beach.
Well, yeah. Damn you! It's like rainy today. Yeah.
It's actually
Well, all I know is when my girlfriend tried to go to the beach. It rained, and so she's not happy. Yeah, any other stuff about like all the Congress or data that you want to dive into? Because I could answer it now, and you'll never see me ever again.
Why Cory Booker is all alone?
So this is the Senate. This is the Democrats in the Senate, by the way, the plot. Yeah, you know, what we're kind of looking at is when you plot these things, you want to create what data geeks call a typology. So you're looking at people that have trends of similar behavior to make it easier to lay out a strategy. And every now and then you just have a real outlier. Like, so for example, in the Republican House, Paul Ryan, in part because he ran for vice president, has 4.9 million Facebook followers. He single-handedly brings up the average of every Republican in the House by 15,000 Facebook fans, which is just, it's outrageous. But Cory Booker's similar in the Senate, the senator from New Jersey who, is known for in fact, he tweeted at me about this study because he's like, hey, thanks, at Mike. And I was like, hey, Cory. And my cloud score went up like 3 points. But he tweets out like vegetarian meals, and we ignore in creating the index all like the junk, because there's people that there's members of Congress who tweet about college football quite regularly, but don't respond to constituent concerns, which look, if you're in North Dakota, that's probably par for the course.
I do know that Cory Booker started following people even when he was a mayor.
Yeah,
he would actually go and save somebody from a fire, and he would tweet out, and people would follow him. He would follow people.
Yeah.
Which is why there's so many followers.
So he's a freak, basically. Yeah, in the Senate, there's a couple interesting things about the Democratic Senate. One is that, so you got a lot of people, obviously, in Senate seats that are almost always going to be for Democrats. So California, New York, Massachusetts. These elections aren't typically very competitive. So when we look at those folks, what's funny is the people that do the best, who we call the blue state social champions, they're almost all women. The women kick butt, like Barbara Mikulski from Maryland. She's like fierce, and Barbara Boxer. And then the guys over here who represent like these seats that will never, they're like, nah, I don't really care. So like Chris Coons from Delaware, he's just like, it's like Facebook, whatever. He's all in Africa policies. No, so the blue dogs, the more conservative districts will be over here. So that's interesting. There's a cohort of people who are kind of in conservative states that do really kick butt, and those are people like Harry Reid and Claire McCaskill. So we call them the great campaigners. They've had really tough re-elections, and they've leveraged social. So you can start to see some of these, everybody knows Harry Reid was impossible to beat. For those of you who don't know the story of Harry Reid, when he was a kid, he walked 20 miles to go to school because he lived in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, in this town called Searchlight, Nevada, and he literally had to walk 20 miles to go to school. And he was like a boxing champion who then became the prosecutor who took down a lot of the mobbed up casinos. He has to remote start his car. Because there's been so many attempts to blow up his car, so he has to have a remote starter. But he's just a tough son of a bitch, but he's great, and he's an old guy. He's just like this old peaceful guy. You'd never know it. But he's up here, and then there's some people that have a little bit of a problem. Yeah.
In general, on the West Coast, Congress folks are better at tweeting everything than everybody kind of trends out.
So yeah, the West Coast is a little better, but it's not because because San Francisco. What it is because there's a lot of really safe districts where there's so Karen Bass from Los Angeles loves social media, but you know what? It trends actually more along with the Congressional Black Caucus, who's really good. So it's like the Barbara Lees and the Karen Basses who do the best. The white folks don't do as well. in the sort of like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, hipster world. It's the Black Caucus that kicks butt. It's interesting. We do notice some trends with where states kind of like have behavioral patterns. So Tennessee scores really high on the SPRI index. I think a part of it is because the Tea Party is really prevalent in Tennessee, and if you're a Republican who's sort of like sane and you're not really responsive to the Tea Party, they'll kind of throw you out of office. So there's a couple folks like just Tennessee, everybody kicks butt. Wisconsin was also really good, and then there's some states where like everybody just got together and they stink at it, like Pennsylvania. So they make like good beer and good chocolate in Pennsylvania, but not much else. Question?
Do you, in your experience, have there been any campaigns that have used social media against their own, against themselves?
To their own like chagrin?
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been. Anthony Weiner would probably be, he would be the poster child. I just like, what? Oh, you should probably Google it. We're trying to keep it PG-13 here, so yeah.
What do you think is like the next, do you see congressmen Snapchatting in the future? So what's the next tool that's going to be like?
So Snapchat's already big. In fact, so one of the interesting trends with Snapchat, one of the top programmers for Snapchat, a guy named Ilya Hickinson, used to work with me. And so I've been kind of working behind the scenes with Snapchat to help their political business grow. One of the things that's interesting about Snapchat is that like a lot of political campaign consultants now use Snapchat so that it makes it harder for them to get busted for saying things that they would never want to see in the press. But yeah, Snapchat will be big in
Stories,
yeah.
We're starting to see already stories, advocate stories on Snapchat and also on Tinder. So if really?
But now,
You can take a screen picture of Snapchat anyway, so you still
it's just harder. You have to be like really on the ball. It's harder to dig.
I think it's all about also meeting people where they are. If you talk to any 14-year-old to 20-year-old, Snapchat is where they go. And so it's meeting people where they are. In rural communities, Facebook is still the tool that they use, maybe not so much Twitter. So it's not so much about thinking Twitter and Facebook is, it's more about what people like to use as well as what lawmakers are using.
Yeah.
So they're giving me the sign over there, so I want to finish with one thing. So part of the philosophy that we have with FundAction is that people love their phones. How many of you did not bring your phone today?
You feel naked.
Right? And so we had a little contest, so you can text SMW for Social Media Week to 52886 if you want to participate. And we have a little gift card for you. We had some people that did it before, and it's fine, and we're going to randomize it really quick if you do. If you want to use tools like this when you do events, let us know, and do so is really engaging. So, final remarks, Mike? Final remarks?
Well, I would just say like final remarks are, we've now entered a world in which what I call multi-channel communications are really important. You cannot rely on just email or just this or just that. You have to have a lot of ways to cut through if you have a message. And platforms like FundAction let you do that. Understanding how people are receptive to different platforms really help you do that. And that's the key. You gotta use all the tools in the toolkit.
I would just say quickly, people want to change outcomes politically and legislatively, and I think, the interest in taking action, making it as easy as possible, is a really great opportunity for campaign managers. So, making it easy for your advocates is the way to go. They want to do it.
Are you participating in any of the current presidential campaigns? Have they reached out to you for your services?
I've talked to literally every single presidential campaign except for Ted Cruz and Donald Trump.
Except for Ted Cruz.
Yeah, they're interesting folks.
Sorry, except for Ted Cruz.
And Donald Trump.
He doesn't need you.
No, he has no need. No, he's way bigger than all this. Huge. Yeah.
Who do you think's been doing a really good job?
Jeb Bush behind the scenes, incredible. He has the, but without a doubt, the best infrastructure that nobody sees, and it's for one particular reason. What Bush can do that no other Republican's done before is actually divide social media accounts directly to his local volunteers. He can say, not only here's your numbers to call, but here's all your Twitter to tweet. And the reason why he can do it is he has a CTO named Andy Barquette, who came from Facebook, who figured out a lot of the behind the scenes. So the guy I would say who you might not see like, oh, you know, he's all fancy on Twitter or whatever, but really is doing the groundwork is Jeb Bush. Scott Walker has a really smart digital team. It doesn't reflect so far in debates, but he does. And you know, Bernie Sanders has a lot going, but he has to translate it into votes, and that's going to be his job. If Joe Biden gets in,
They're giving me the.
Okay, we have to go.
So we
All right.
we have to launch it. So we're
Oh,
going to say 3, 2, 1 to give the winner a little something here. So can we meet 3, 2, 1?
3,